So on today's episode, we spoke to the lovely Dom from Mars Designs, all about her transition from being a side hustler. Although as we got deeper into the conversation, we felt like side hustle wasn't really a fair term for her situation, and how she's now transitioned 6 months ago into full-time business owner.
And Dom has a really beautiful approach to business. She is a creative. She is seeking this balance. She's also finding a way to express her truest self now that she's full-time in the business. And it's so beautiful to hear her lessons, her growth, and some real honesty as well about those truth bombs of being a full-time business owner, which I think many of us can relate to.
I'm Becky Lloyd-Pack.
And I'm Becky Stanton.
And this is the Doing Business Differently podcast. So welcome to the podcast, Dom. Such a pleasure to have you. We're going to be talking more about your journey transitioning from side hustle into full-time business. But before we get, stuck into all that, I'd love it if you could introduce yourself to our listeners.
Yes, thank you for having me. I am Dominique. I'm creative behind Mars Designs. I am a brand designer, UX designer, Squarespace website designer, all of the designers for coaches and wellness service providers. I basically help them to build an online presence that resonates with the right people and instills lasting confidence in their brand, not just for 2 weeks or a month, but a longer period of time whilst their vision comes to life and while it evolves over time. And so, yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Amazing. And I think we've known it. I can't actually remember how long we've known each other for now. Like, it's a couple of years at least.
At least 4 years.
Yeah.
Something like
that. Yeah. And it's been a joy to be on the journey with you. And also, the big milestone, I suppose, is that around, was it 6 months ago you said that you transitioned?
Yes. Literally, like the beginning of September, right before my birthday, was when I officially left my job, my full-time job.
Amazing. Yeah. And how long were you doing it as a side hustle prior to actually going all in?
So I originally started in 2018. Although in my head, I'm like, technically it wasn't until 2019 because 2018 I just see as the experimental year. And just not really seeing it as a business, but more as just a side hustle, but not something that I would see myself building into a business like I did in later years. So technically 6 years, but in my head it's 5.
And your full-time job, was that still in branding?
So I've always been website design predominantly. My last job was in UX product design. So it was more of the strategic side of design as well as obviously the visual side as well. But yeah, I think at that time, it was actually very different to what I was doing within my business. In my business, it was predominantly just branding and Squarespace website design. I didn't include as much UX stuff as I do now, just because at the time I couldn't really see how to make the two work together, because UX always felt very corporate and techie, and the people that I was working with in my business were not that at all. So now I'm doing the unpacking of, okay, UX is actually across the board, no matter what industry you're in. It's just figuring out how to make it work for everyone else. So yeah, it's always been, I think my main thing has always been website design, and branding came about from, when I first started my business, actually, I was starting as a hand letterer. So I was just drawing hand lettering all day, every day. That was how Becky actually came to find me on Instagram. And then that grew into me using that skill to create brands for people. And then I was bringing in more of the website design stuff as well, and then realized that I love website design more. So that's mainly my focus at the moment.
Yeah. And also I feel like we should just clarify UX. What does UX mean, Dom?
Oh, gosh, I'm always forgetting about these. So UX is basically user experience. It's essentially how, from the moment someone lands on your website to the moment they book a call with you, pay for a course, book in a membership, anything like that, it's how they get from A to B in the simplest way possible, without any clutter, without any frustration, without any overwhelm. And that's the simplest way that I like to describe it without all of the techie jargon, because it's so easy to fall down that rabbit hole. But that's how I would describe it.
Yeah, and I think it's so important because I feel like we went through a period of seeing like really design heavy websites that were like purely just focused on how beautiful can we make this look. And then actually in terms of usability though, it was a nightmare. And I actually always think about the Zara website, how they used to display like their clothes. It was the worst thing ever. Yes, it looked beautiful like editorially, but actually trying to find anything was an absolute nightmare. And in my head I'm always like, that is the classic example of like you've forgotten what you're actually trying to do.
So true. Yeah, it was like a catalogue of like models, wasn't it? But it's like, but how do I, what is it? What what am I buying?
Yeah.
So true.
It's so easy to fall into that trap as well, because the fact that visual design is the first impression that you're making, that you can kind of get stuck thinking that's all you need to care about. But yeah, like you said, if people can't use it, then what's the point sort of thing, other than just some sort of external validation to say, hey, your website's pretty, this is cool. But is it actually going to bring you any money at the end of the day? Probably not, if people can't find how to actually pay you to do stuff. So
I think that's why I love you, Dom. Like, because not like with all this, we talk about like usability and all that, but your designs are also absolutely beautiful as well. So it's really showing that you don't have to compromise. It isn't choosing style or usability. You can have both, but actually it's so important to work with somebody that is mindful of that. Because yeah, like you say, I think a lot of us, particularly in like maybe our early days, we just really, you know, our website is what makes us feel like a valid business owner. Like it's a big part of that legitimacy piece. But actually, we can then forget, no, this isn't actually about me and my ego and making me feel like a serious business owner. This is about actually helping my people find me, understand what I do, be able to navigate, find the information they want without having to search for ages. So yeah, I think that's why for me, if anybody's ever like, oh, do you know, web designer, I'm like, Dom.
Thank you. Yeah, it's definitely something that I'm trying to talk about a lot more, just to be like, yes, the visuals are important and your brand is important, all of that stuff, but you need a website that actually works, especially as a small business owner, because if you don't have that and you're just relying on the social medias of the world, like, yes, they will do really good things for your brand, but at the same time, they will only really take you so far. If you then end up in a season where you just don't want to be on social media at all, what do you have to fall back on? And that's why I always say it's always good, even if it's just to have a one-page website, like anything at all, just to make sure that you have a piece of online land that you own. I will always advocate for that, no matter what.
Yeah, and it works behind the scenes, isn't it? As someone who's like a spiritual business owner, I just love that my website is just doing my work and is like sharing my energy because I put the work in for that project.
Yeah,
and even
exactly.
like yesterday, Instagram went down, right? So like there are unfortunately moments when social media crashes, and then it is the emails and the websites that are, you know, really doing the selling for your business.
Yeah, exactly that. So it's always good to spread your eggs across multiple baskets, like not to the point of overwhelm that you can't keep up with everything. Like you just need like 2-3 platforms essentially. But yeah, as long as it's not just all in social media where you don't have control over it, then it's all gravy.
So I would love to know your story of deciding and then leaping from, I guess, a secure role into believing in your vision and like expanding it even more than you have done over the last 5-6 years. Can you tell us that story and what led you to the point of when you felt ready? Or did you even feel ready?
I guess a part of me did feel ready, but there was a big part of me that was just like, no, don't do it. What are you doing? Oh my God. Just the fear. The fear of the unknown definitely held me back for a while. But I guess I would probably say that, as with many people, the pandemic really made a big difference for me. And I actually started my last role right before we went into lockdown. So I was there for I was in the office for it was like 2 weeks to a month. And then it was just because at home all of the time. So that was obviously a very strange experience for me because I've obviously never had that before. But I think in the last maybe year and a half, I started feeling those inklings of actually, do I actually want to take my business full time at some point? I don't quite know. I do like this, the stability of a monthly income and knowing that that's there to support me. Do I really want my business to do that? Oh, I don't know. So I kept talking myself out of it and into it and out of it. And I think it was more as I started talking to more people, because most of the people that I speak to are self-employed. So as I was connecting with them on a deeper level and actually finding out about their own experiences and why they actually took the leap themselves, and just how they were living their life outside of the bubble of corporate land, it made me realize that I didn't just want that as well, but it was something that I needed in my life, because I've just always had a corporate job since I left uni some 10 years ago now. It's like I've never known anything different. And yeah, I think the pandemic for me really made me realize how much of a different lifestyle I wanted. Like, I didn't want to do the commute. I didn't want to have to sit in meetings for hours on end. I didn't want to have to continuously feel like I had to justify time off, or if I needed a mental health day or anything like that. I just wanted to be able to just do it on if I wanted to. Almost like taking back control of my own lifestyle. It almost feels a bit in a perfectionist, but at the same time it's like, but why not at the end of the day? And yeah, there was just loads of stuff happening in the last year, particularly in my role. Not necessarily with me directly, but just in the culture of the place. That was just like, the more and more it was going on, the more I was just having enough. And it did get to a point where I was realizing that I just wasn't sleeping properly. The anxiety was high. I didn't want to talk to anyone. Introvert mode was just 110%. It's like, no, I actually need to make a difference now. So it was like a physical shift that I felt that made me realize that, no, you're ready to actually make this leap now, and ready to make the leap into actually focusing on just my business and not feel compelled to go into another corporate role, because it's just going to be the same thing in a different shell. So let's just break out of that mold and just go for it, because why the hell not?
Ooh, we can feel the energy, right? And I'm curious because I resonate with this story as well. Do you feel like we speak about the fear and it feels like it's capital T, capital F, doesn't it? The fear of like the next phase. And do you feel like, how long do you feel like you sat with the fear of this toing and froing of should I, shouldn't I? Because I think a lot of people do kind of sit in that energy, maybe put their head in the sand. You know, I did for a long time. I'm just curious for you, like, what was your experience with navigating that fear?
I think for me, it was probably at least a year of navigating that fear. And a lot of the time I would just shut it down and not think about it, just distract myself with absolutely anything else to not have to think about it. But yeah, I think it was through me working with a coach, actually. She was the one that helped me to actually stop doing that and actually unpack it and navigate that space. Like, what is it I was actually afraid of? What did I think was going to happen? Good or bad? Yeah, just all of that stuff that you don't really think about in that moment, because you are just stuffing it down and not trying to think about it because we don't like feeling fearful, essentially. Yeah, it definitely took a lot of growing my self-awareness and navigating that path without just distracting myself away from it. I think really helped me to actually just walk through the fear rather than running away from it.
Yeah. And I think as well, like, just on that point about like getting a coach, I think sometimes we don't know how to ask ourselves these questions. Like, it's not something we've ever really done. Like, it's not something that we're taught to do, how to actually dive into your emotions and see what wisdom is there and work through them. Like, our culture is really just like, go, keep going, like, follow this path, just do this. So actually, like, being able to slow down and really sit with something, it's not something, like, it's not a skill that many of us have. So I think that was like, it sounds like it was great for you. I've worked with coaches that have been really pivotal for me as well. And what actually, even like what helped you actually make the decision to work with a coach as well? Like, what was behind that energy of actually, I want to move through that? Was it something that you just felt building?
Yeah, definitely. And like you said, it did. I was coming to the realization that I just needed to talk to someone else, because as much as I could try and journal to my heart's content about it, like the overthinking stuff would still be there. So I almost needed that external voice to hear what I was saying and help me read between the lines, because you just can't do that for yourself no matter how hard you try. Um, so yeah, that was a really big decision for me, to just actually have that support outside of my business, outside of my job, just having that, having that support there. It could be about absolutely anything as well. It doesn't even need to be about business. It could just be about life. And yeah, it just really made a big difference for me having that. And there was loads of conversations that we had that it's one of those things where you jump on a call thinking you're going to talk about one thing, and then it ends up going into something completely different, and you're like, actually, that is the conversation that I needed. That's the thing that's going to help me progress and move forward. And it was a lot of that we had. So yeah, it was definitely a thing that I'm glad that I did when I did it. So
Amazing. So now let's switch gears. You've been doing it full time for 6 months. How's it going?
it's like, oh god. I can't remember who I heard it from, but I remember hearing someone say that being self-employed is one of the biggest self-development projects you'll ever do in your life. And oh my god, so like even though I have been running this as a side hustle for 5 years, there is literally nothing that will prepare you to do it full time, no matter what you do. Like there will just always be something new to navigate, something new that needs to change, something new that you need to add. There's always something in the background that needs doing. But I feel like it's helped me really start to come into my element and come back to me again. Especially because I've been trying to, especially the last couple of like 2-3 months, especially really trying to find a place of ease, I would say, in terms of my routines and stuff like that. Because shifting from full-time to self-employment, it is very easy to stick to the standard 9 to 5 routine because that's just what you know. But I found that when I don't follow those conformities and actually work with my own energy and the natural seasons, I'm feeling like I'm working so much better, like, and actually doing the things that I want to do, not the things that I feel like I should do. So for example, like my weeks now, I have Mondays as my CEO days, as I like to call them, where it could be a day for content creation or writing blogs, working on things behind the scenes in the business, or it could just be a day off that I take. And I cannot tell you how much of a difference that has been making to my weeks, just having that slow ease into the week rather than being like, oh my god, what am I doing? How am I it just makes such a difference. And then focusing on client work later in the week, it just feels so good doing it that way. And even other things, just like joining memberships and actually being able to join the calls at the times during the day when I would have been able to do that in my role, and being able to talk to more business owners and work with more business owners because I'm not having to squeeze them in around things at the day job. Like, it just makes such a difference, and I'm able to really think about things within my business a lot clearer. And I think one thing I'm really trying to remember is that this is a marathon, not a sprint. So even though that there are lots of things that I really want to get done this year, if it doesn't happen this year, it's totally fine. Like, I'm not just in the business for 2024. Like, I want it to be a long game thing. And yeah, that's something I'm really trying to remind myself. But overall, it's going well. I would say. Short answer.
Yeah, and it does feel that way, doesn't it? There's so many benefits, and I'm hearing like freedom from you, right? Freedom of time, freedom of choice. You
Yeah.
get to design your weeks how you like to work and all these things, but with that freedom and being a solopreneur, the fear can come back, right? It's like you said, it's like 1,000 or 1,000,000 ego deaths as a business owner, because it just invites forward all of these parts of us that are still, maybe seeking control, or, everyone's nuanced and different. But if you're happy to share, what do you feel? I know you said you're an open book, Dom, but feel free to say, stop being nosy, Becky.
Cut the interview.
Turning into a coaching therapy session. Tell me your fears. No, I'm just curious. What do you feel? Because when I work with clients, there tends to be a theme comes up in these sneaky packages, but there tends to be a theme that comes up. What do you feel in the last 6 months has been coming up that you've been really navigating for you? If you're happy to share.
Overworking, like constantly feeling like, because this is the way that I make money now, like I can't stop until I'm making enough money to live properly, which is just not true. Because I'm just a chronic overthinker, a chronic inner perfectionist, just all of the things. And it definitely stems from corporate life, just feeling like you need to do more in order to get to the next level, whatever that means. So that's definitely something that I've been navigating. And I think just remembering to have boundaries, and not just with clients, but with yourself as well. So just in terms of, like, for example, saying that I don't want to do client projects or do any client work on Mondays, but then going against my own boundary because I feel like I need to meet this arbitrary deadline that I've set. I'm just like, why do we do these things? It's just like, yes, deadlines can work, but also deadlines don't necessarily mean that the world is going to explode if you don't meet it. It's totally fine to take an extra day if you need to. I think also just getting back into the flow of marketing and promoting myself. Like, there's always such a hard thing to do. I feel like even more so as a creative who has been doing it as a side hustle for so long, not necessarily that it feels different when it's a full-time thing, but there is like an additional layer of pressure to make sure that, like, whatever you put out works in some way, because you don't have anything else to fall back on if it doesn't. So yeah, and I guess that relates to another fear, which is just, is it actually all going to work out? Like, am I going to have to just tuck my tail between my legs and find another corporate role? I really don't think so, because, at the end of the day, I made that decision for a reason. And granted, there may be time in the future where I feel like I want to get like a part-time job on the side, but I'd rather that be a thing that I want to do because I want to, rather than feeling like, because I have to, like, I have to make it work, I have to have money coming in, because it just takes all of the fun and the joy out of everything at the end of the day when you have to do that. And granted, there could possibly be times when that is a thing where you just have to do it and just get the job done, but ultimately I do just want the ease and freedom as much as possible. I really do.
Yeah, it's hard. So, when you've tasted it, it's hard to lose it.
Yeah.
Like, this is how my life could be. Oh, please don't take this away from me. So yeah, and I also want to say I so resonate with what you were saying about those patterns of overwork, patterns of, the perfectionism and the deadlines. And I know you and I have been having like lots of, chats just privately between us, because I think there's also like a weird added pressure because the work you do is creative, and actually like having to be creative on demand is something that is
so hard.
It's so difficult. And, we can come up with techniques and ways to manage it. But, in that ideal world where we are trying to create freedom for ourselves, I think part of it is like we want freedom for our creativity and to almost like work in harmony with it. But then when you've got a deadline that's set, it's like, oh, well, I kind of have to be creative now. And that's like a really interesting pressure as well, I think, to navigate versus something that, and I'm sure it's the same across all things. Like, I'm sure with coaching as well, you've got to be in like the right energy and the right headspace to actually deliver effective sessions. But yeah, I think that just adds this whole other nuance of like, I want the freedom, but there is restriction and there is certain boundaries. And like you say, I think it's starting to build the confidence to be able to be like, unlike in a job, maybe, where you have like a series of things that are going to happen after you and, the deadlines feel really fixed. Actually, in our business, we do have more flexibility to play with these things, to be like, no, I made this up. This came from me, not from like some higher up. Like, this was me that created this. So yeah, being able to move into more confidence, I think is something that is helpful over time. But still, like, I've been doing this full time this is my 6th year. I still struggle with overwork. I still struggle with all those things. So I do think it's like, it's never about, fixing them and becoming cured. It's almost like learning to become aware of them, learning how to process them, learning how to like dive deeper and deeper into the layers that are kind of stored within that. So yeah, I just want to say I totally resonate.
It's just, oh God, yeah, it's just, yeah, like I said, it is just a big self-development project at the end of the day. But yeah, at the same time, it's a fun one. So it doesn't feel stifling or anything like that. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, isn't it? And I was just voice noting Becky yesterday about, we build these businesses that are things that we're really passionate about, and maybe they're skills or like, very creative things, or you naturally like love to be creative. And then we apply it to monetizing it, having the CEO hat on, and then being effective with our time and, all of these things. And it kind of dampens that energy. So I'd love to hear from you, like, how do you, the word is like nourish your creativity and that passion, it's for you to continuously create and like have an output.
So one thing I definitely try and do is take a break in between projects. I feel like it's really easy to just keep churning and keep booking in projects one after the other. And one thing I've been doing over the past 5-6 weeks now, I think it's week 6, is I've been doing the artist way. Becky Obby's like, yeah. Which has actually been really beneficial in order for me to see other ways that I can nourish myself outside of the digital world, because I think it's so easy to get stuck in looking for inspiration or just trying to find something to fill your cup on the internet, but there's a whole world outside there that we've kind of forgotten about. And one thing I've been trying to do recently is just reconnecting with things I used to love when I was younger. So things like painting, things like jigsaw puzzles, just going to exhibitions, really big on gaming at the minute as well. I even saw a TikTok the other day, like a call out to millennials, like, what is your midlife crisis going on right now? Like, what's the thing that you're choosing? And someone had stitched it to say, yeah, I'm going back in my cozy gaming era. Like, she picked up a Pokemon pillow, cat ear headphones, and I was like, yeah, that's me.
So true.
Just doing all of the things that just make you feel like a kid again, because yeah, we kind of lose that over the years. So yeah, that's definitely how I've been trying to reconnect with ways to nourish myself, and just seeing all the different ways that just things that are out in the world can inspire you, like things like architecture or just shop signs or conversations that people have in a coffee shop, just all of those things. Like, unless you're really aware of it in the moment, you don't realize how much those things can inspire you. Like, for example, I was having a chat with another designer yesterday, and we were talking about passion projects, and I've always said that I've always really struggled with the idea of passion projects because I never know what to do. So, because usually when you think about them, you always go down the route of, okay, I'm going to design it for this candle brand or this skincare brand, and I'm just like, but it just feels really superficial to me, so I've never done them. And then she reminded me that a passion project could be based on something that you value. And I was like, it just opened a world to me. So like we were talking about how I really value slow living at the moment, and just not always being connected and doing all of the time. I should give myself time to be. And then we were talking about it, and I was like, oh, this actually could be a passion project for a coach or a wellness provider. And I was like, oh, it ties into the business. This is just like, and then that conversation alone was just like super inspirational. So yeah, it is having those connections to things outside of just the work that I do that helps to fill up the cup over time.
Yeah. And I wonder, is that like a big difference between having it, and I know it wasn't a side hustle because it's been going 5 years, right? It's kind of not doing it justice calling it a side hustle. But do you feel like that is a difference, that you felt more out in the world being in the corporate? Because sometimes the pattern I see with people who are full-time in their job, who aren't, you know, nomads traveling the world, they're at home a lot. And it is isolating, and that does stifle our creativity, doing the same thing, the routines day in, day out. And I was in London for a week recently. I have felt like a different Becky, right? New environments, seeing people all the time, having really good conversations, having time for me just to like use my intuition and like flow around London. It was like, I was overhearing conversations. I'm that person, I always say, I'm the person on the tube, like looking at everyone and like listening to everyone because I don't see people often.
A little creep.
Yeah, absolute creep. But I'm like, you're inspiring me. I'm soaking up this energy until it's too much. But yeah, it's so true, isn't it? It's that connection of, if you're creative, you get inspired by the world around you, not from sitting at your desk 24/7.
Yeah, like for example, I went on holiday to Japan for the first time ever last year. And that was easily one of the most creatively nourishing things I've ever done in my life. Like, it's always one of those places where I never thought I would actually get to go. So actually being there, you're just like, it feels like you're in a completely different world just because of how things are, how the people are, how things work. It's just, yeah, I remember coming back from that trip, just like sharing all of the things on Instagram, and everyone being like, oh my God, this was like the best holiday ever. And yeah, like even now I'm thinking of things that I can do within projects that has been inspired by my trips to Japan. So yeah, it's definitely a case of get out into the world and just remember that we're not beings that need to stay at home all of the time. That's not what we're made for. So.
Yeah. To me, this is like talking about basically expanding your perspective and almost bursting your little bubble. Because if you think about like going to somewhere like Japan, it's so different. You're essentially viewing it through the eyes of a child. Like, so if you think about when we were kids growing up, everything was new all the time. And so you would soak everything in and notice every detail. But actually, when you start to become more familiar with something, we stop seeing in the same way. And we start to just like, our brain fills in the blanks of how things are and the way things, you know, function. But going somewhere like Japan is something like, I can't do that here because this is all so unfamiliar. So that's, I think, part of that nourishment. And I think there's almost like a beautiful lesson in there that we could probably recreate that without having to go to Japan, but almost like, how can I walk into a space or go somewhere maybe that I've been a million times before? How could I view this through the eyes of a child? What can I notice that I've maybe not noticed before? So I think there's like, it's just a beautiful practice that we can really lean into and introduce in kind of a simple way. And it's funny about the London thing, because when I was there a couple of weeks ago, I think I text back in, I was like, I love who I am in London. Like, I just love this version of me. And it was, again, just being in that scenario. It's like, okay, what is it about the Becky that's here versus the Becky that's at home? And it is that sense of actually feeling connected to the world. Because here, because where we live is a bit isolated, it's kind of semi-rural. You know, my neighbours are sheep. You know, I get to walk through fields, and it's beautiful in terms of my connection to nature. But in terms of my connection to other people and to different things, it's very limited. So I think, yeah, getting out and experiencing new things, it doesn't have to cost a fortune. I mean, if you can afford to go to Japan, oh my God, do it. That is like, I would love to do it. But I think there's like big things we can do and little things that we can do to really start to nourish that creativity, for sure.
Yeah, like even just the other day, I just took myself on a day out in London, and obviously I live here, so there's a lot of things that I take for granted. It's just seeing them all the time. Um, and just even walking through, like slowing down, actually being really present, like not going out with my headphones as I always do, but actually listening to the world around me. Um, I even found like a random tea shop that I never even knew was there before, and I just went in and I was like, oh, this is fancy. And I was like picking up the samples and smelling them and all of that stuff. Like you said, just like a kid, just finding things for the new time. It's just, yeah, we don't realize how much we can limit ourselves in our natural environments, just where we live. Because like I said, we always feel like we've seen everything, but we really haven't. So it's just getting out of your comfort zone and opening yourself up to the world around you. You could just discover so much more than you think you can.
I love that.
And I think that's with the artist way, it makes you make it a priority. I think
Exactly.
that's one of the differences, right? Like, because I'm doing it as well. I think I'm a couple of weeks ahead of you. But actually, where you can say to yourself, yeah, I'm going to do that. Yeah, that sounds great. It just never makes it to the top of your priority list because there's always other things going on. But actually engaging in something like the artist way that is like a very deliberate practice of, you know, every week, how am I going to have my artist date? How am I going to go and actually cultivate that sense of wonder, cultivate that sense of connection, really tune in to the environment around me and really nourish that part of myself? I think it has to, like, if especially, I would say, especially if you do something creative in terms of what you deliver to people, I think it's essential. Like, that's what's going to keep your work fresh. That's what's going to keep you feeling inspired because you're constantly like refilling that cup, as it were. So yeah, I'm loving doing the artist way. I'm like advocating it to everybody. I'm like, you should do it. You should do it.
Oh, I love it though, Dom. It's like stop and smell the tea leaves. I feel like I'm going to take that away with me. But
yeah. I'm going to write that down because I feel like I need to remember that myself.
Yeah, it's so true. And I do it. I drink coffee. I don't know why I have to say it like a confession. I drink coffee, and then I love the smell of coffee. And when I stop and smell like the coffee, like in the coffee pot, even before I've made the coffee, it's like, oof, that presence of like just enjoying like this like experience of the smells. And I always remember towards the end of my breakdown / burnout in my corporate job, the morning commute used to drive me wild. Like, I would turn up to work and people would like avoid me because I was like, I'm doing the same thing every day. I'm so bored. I'm so like lost. Like this commute, seeing the same people every day drives me wild. And someone had a recommendation of every morning look for a different color. So even though I was doing the same route, and then I got my team involved, and we would every morning would be sending, like, if yellow, see a yellow flower, or you'd see like someone with a yellow jacket on a bike. And I feel like our routines and time are like so caught up, right? My week in London felt like a month because I was doing so many new things. Time felt slow and luxurious, right? And then I came back home and I was like, how's it Thursday already? Because I was back in routine, right? And it's like, how, even though like I'm present and I'm grateful here, less, I guess, there is less presence because I'm so familiar here. I felt like time was just like going through my fingers like too quickly. And I was coming up to my birthday, so there's a bit probably of time, belief, and story tied up there. Where's time going? But yeah, I feel like this presence is really around like extending time, right? Really like luxuriating like in the moment. And sometimes we do need these little rituals, like looking for a color to really like anchor us to know where to focus. Because sometimes just being present feels heavy or like too much, or like, how do I do that? Whereas if it's like, look at everything green in the room, it allows you to really like be like, okay, look at everything and oh, let me focus and appreciate. So yeah, pause and smell the tea leaves. I love it, Dom.
I love that. I think that's like some beautiful practices that people can play with at home as well. Like if you're listening and you're like, oh yeah, I've always struggled with maybe that, how to actually take pauses. Yeah, giving yourself like little mini creative challenges, like look for all the squares in the room, of just playful things like that. I'm actually reading a book called The Art of Contemplation at the moment by Richard Rudd, who is also the guy who created the Gene Keys. And when I say created, he would say he downloaded the transmission, just put that out there, channeled it. But yeah, his big thing about contemplation is that we need pauses and we need space to do it. And so he recommends, and he's actually got an app, I think it's called the Triple Flame, and it has like a reminder every day, and it's at 3 points throughout the day. You get a notification and you just sit and you take, I think it's like 3 deep breaths, but you can see on the app everybody around the world doing it at the same time. So I think that like giving yourself those pauses, even if they're just like little mini moments, to just let things slow, it's so important. So I'm really glad you shared that with us, Becky, because I think it's super helpful.
Yeah, and it helped me at the time. Like I said, I was going through a really challenging time, and it brought some joy back into this really challenging season I was in. And so yeah, and then I did the leap like Dom, and I was like, right, I want to see more flowers. I want to be more present.
Yeah, that's the danger, right? When you actually pause, then you do also go, oh, I'm not very happy right now.
Right. Yeah, all those nudges come up, right? And coming back to you, Dom, like it's kind of like, it's always this balance of like, how big's the fear versus how much is the vision that I want? Exactly. And for me, even though the fear was present, and I didn't go down the coaching route necessarily, but like I had this kind of beautiful angel come into my world who was able to like guide me through it. It was like, actually, even though the fear's there, this belief, this trust in where I'm going, even though I have no idea what it is, I didn't even know I wanted to be a coach then. It was almost the fear was less than, therefore the leap could happen.
Yeah, I definitely resonate with that, because like I said, like for me, I did just feel that physical reaction to it. And whereas before, when I thought about it, I was just all in my head. So that's where like the thinking on and off about whether it's actually something I wanted to do, I was just going back and forth so much about it. But when I actually dropped out of my head and realized how I felt, I was like, no, this is the time. let's take that leap of faith and just see what happens.
Leap into the ego deaths. We're with it, so dumb.
Yeah. And I actually just curious, it just popped into my head then, so I thought I'd just ask the question, because I know you work with like quite spiritual entrepreneurs. I know you're quite spiritual yourself. Were you always spiritual, or is it something that you felt was like amplified as you started to create your own stuff? Because I say it from the perspective of, I was not really ever spiritual until I started my business, and until I started to connect with those things. So for you, was it, what was your journey with that like?
I think similar to you, I was becoming more aware of it the more I was building my business and realizing who I wanted to work with, and me resonating with their messages. I was like, oh, this actually feels like something I want to explore more. I did remember though that I think there's always been a part of me that's been spiritual. Like I realized that I got my first crystal when I was about 8-9 years old. Like, I don't know if you remember, but there used to be magazines, or like, it's like a monthly magazine where you could buy, you'd buy the magazine for like the first week, and you'd get a binder. And then every week after that, or every month after that, you'd get the next edition that you'd put in the binder. Yes.
Treasures of the Earth, wasn't it?
I think so. Yeah, so there was different ones. There was a spiritual one. I remember there was a dinosaur one. It was cards, like loads of other stuff. And one of the ones I had came with amethyst crystal, and I still got it to this day. And I was like, oh my God, I forgot that I've had that for so long. So yeah, there's always been a part of me that has always been drawn into it. It's been curious about it. But I think it was only probably in the pandemic actually, so like 3-4 years ago, when I really started to connect with it regularly. And realized, for example, how much I bloody love tarot cards and oracle cards. Just my collection went from 0 to about 20 in a few weeks. And yeah, it was one of those things where it was helping me to, I guess, navigate that time. So doing things like journaling every day, trying out meditation to actually help me just calm my brain during the stressful times. Hell, even just doing more yoga, like stuff like that, which can all seem a bit like cliche and woo-woo and all of that stuff. But when you kind of forget about what the industry is saying to you and actually realize how it's making you feel, like that's why I love these practices so much. So yeah, it's definitely something that's grown over time, but I think there's always been a part of me that has connected with it in some way since I was young.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. So to sort of like bring this to a nice little conclusion place and really focusing on this, the transition that you've been through, I've kind of got two questions really. Because I know at the beginning you were like, nothing can prepare you for being full time. But actually, do you think there were things through your journey of it just being a side hustle? I say that in so many inverted commas. But as that thing alongside your main job, was there anything that did prepare you for full-time self-employment? And I say that from the perspective of maybe somebody who's been drawn to this podcast, to this particular episode, is maybe someone that's even thinking about starting their side hustle, maybe with a view that will go, one day it might turn into something else. So do you feel like there was some value from that journey in particular? And then the other question, which I can recap afterwards, but is like, I want to know the best thing about like being self-employed versus full-time employment. I also want to know what the worst thing feels like in comparison. So they're my two questions. Hopefully I've not overwhelmed you.
Oh, that second one is a good question. Okay, yeah, I'll come back to that one. So
you can let that percolate in your subconscious.
Yeah. So the first question, how I prepared. So a big thing for me when it was a side hustle was having some sort of system in place to just help me keep the admin side of things in check. Like things like trying to book meetings with clients or just booking in projects in general, knowing what my time actually is and what's available was really beneficial, because otherwise it would have just gone tits up very, very quickly. So having like even just having email templates like for onboarding, offboarding, messages that you would send throughout a project, just having all of those things in place just helped me to not have to think about things on the fly, and would just help me keep track of everything as time went along. How else did I prepare? Joining memberships with people who are your vibe is the number one thing that I would suggest everyone does before they go full time, because having, like, people always say that, when you're going into running your business full time, you're not going to miss the connections with people. My default answer would be no, because I'm an introvert and I just love being in my own space. But at the same time, having those connections with other people who have experienced what you're experiencing, have made the leap or are even considering making the leap at the same time as you, have those people who you can share wins with, the challenges, the fears, the hopes, all of that stuff. Building those connections before you go and take that leap can help you to stay the course when you have made that leap, because you know that there are people in the background that are cheerleading you and supporting you, and you're not doing the journey alone, even though you are a solopreneur. So definitely recommend doing that. A very important one, just have some sort of financial buffer in place, so you're not stressing out from the very first day. Like, you can kind of take the pressure off of your business needing to work from day one. Just if you have that, because we all need money to live at the end of the day. So don't put yourself in a hole just to make the leap to full-time business owner. But do try and give yourself, even if it's just a month or two, just have something just to fall back on if you need to. Boundaries, and always be an advocate for setting boundaries, whether that is for the working hours that you want to do, the days that you want to work, where you want to work, who you want to work with, what you actually want to do as well. Like, just really think about how you actually want to spend your time, because you can spend your time doing a whole bunch of stuff that is not going to make a lick of difference. So having some sort of idea of where you are and where you want to be will definitely help to just see you through, at least for the first few months as well, because you're not scrambling trying to figure out everything on the fly. You've actually got an idea, you have that vision in mind that you're looking for.
Yeah. I think that's incredible, by the way, because I didn't do any of that. I was the person that was scrambling every day, being like, I don't quite know what the priority is today. And yeah, that first year was it's pretty rough, to say the least. I wouldn't change it. To be honest, it's how I work. I tend to learn better and quicker that way, personally. But I think had I known, maybe I would have actually benefited from having a little bit more of a plan before I was like, do you know what? I'm going to just do an internet business and figure it out as I go. So
And
I
that's the
think
thing, like it doesn't, that's the thing, like things don't need to be set in stone either. Like you can just say, okay, for the first 3 months, I'm going to try this and just do that. And then you might reach month 2 and you're like, actually, I don't want to do this anymore. Let's try something else. Like it's kind of having those, I guess I don't want to call them boundaries, but having this like a semi-structure, but knowing that you can break out of it. Like you're not leaving one mold to put yourself into another, is what I'd say.
Yeah. Having a plan, but holding it loosely.
Exactly. Yeah.
Nice. And then to my other question, but no pressure. Maybe just go with what comes up, and it might be something that you've already talked about anyway. But what do you feel like the best thing about being full-time versus part-time in your business has been? What's the absolute, like, this is the full cherry on the top?
Freedom, 100%. It's the, like, for example, being able to take a Monday off from work or deciding I want to do client work on a Monday. It's being able to have slow mornings in the morning and not needing to get up at ridiculous hours in the morning to get on a train for an hour or two to then sit in a stuffy office that is just killing your soul. Like that is definitely a big thing for me. Because again, like what we were talking about with the environments, like being in an open plan office for me just did not work in terms of being a creative, because it was like noise pollution that I couldn't quite cancel out even with headphones. It was not having anything visually inspiring around me, even if I did have I actively didn't have anything on my desk just because I was like, I don't want it. So yeah, I think that was definitely a big thing.
I also used to hate that other people could see my screen. That was like one of my biggest, like when you're in open plan, you're like, people can see what I'm doing. Like, I'm under pressure to like, do something. So yeah, not a vibe.
I think that's why like I've always struggled to do the whole like recording myself for a reel, for example. Be like, this is me designing in my design process. It just, not that it feels icky, but it just, there's something about it I just don't like.
It feels performative, right? Like versus authentic.
Yeah, definitely. That's the perfect way to describe it.
Yeah, I was going to say then, what do you think's been the trickiest thing? And actually here, I want to say, I'm going to add an extra nuance. What's been the trickiest thing that you didn't expect or didn't quite realise was also going to come with being full-time in your business?
Using my voice in a more impactful way. So whether that is through, well, obviously through marketing and just promoting. Yeah, I don't think I realised how much easier I found it when it was a side hustle compared to now, because there was it, I guess subconsciously there was probably less pressure on it when it was a side hustle, because if it didn't work then I had my job to fall back on. Whereas now the messaging and the things that I say, they do have to work in some regard, because it's a business at the end of the day. The business needs to make money. But at the same time, like I've always felt that I want to make an impact over income. And so, yeah, it's almost like really digging deep into the things I want to say and talk about and share. Just it feels like something that's a lot more, it requires a lot more thought and awareness when you are a full-time business owner, I think, because at the end of the day, it's related to your reputation and your brand recognition. Like that's what people are going to know you for. And yeah, I'm just all about being, as like I said earlier, like being an open book and being authentic about it and not feeling not feeling performative and like I need to talk about XYZ because ABC is talking about it. Like, no, I don't want to talk about that. I don't care. Like I want to talk about these things. Yeah, I think that's definitely one of the things that has been tricky to navigate, but at the same time, it's been a way for me to get curious about what is it that I actually want to share with the world? What is the impact I want to make? What is the legacy that I'm building, sort of thing. So
yeah. And I think that's almost like when something's maybe, again, side hustle feels like the wrong word, but I'm just going to use it. When something's like a side hustle, you kind of do view it more clearly as like, this is just like an extension of me. This is something that is like separate from me. But I think when you transition to full time, that it comes a hell of a lot closer and it feels a lot more enmeshed between like, hold on, where do I as a person now end and where does my business begin? And what is that line? And, we've talked about boundaries a lot, but even like, what are the boundaries between where what I do share and what I don't. And the thing is, it's going to be different for everybody, which is what I think makes it almost hard. Like a lot of us would probably be like, God, if someone could just tell me what is appropriate to talk about and what I shouldn't talk about and what the way to navigate this bit cleanly is, great. But actually, because it's so different for everybody, like some people will actively be like, look, I don't really engage in political conversation. Whereas for other people, it's actually a huge part of their brand and what they do. So that line for everybody is difficult. And I love that you've brought it up as well, because yeah, it's something that I resonate with too. And that line changes and it's almost like that line is different for different issues and different things. And so yeah, it's like a constant, lesson to remain curious and to be like, how can I honor this feeling of like what feels worse, speaking about something or not speaking about something, like within me, like where is that line on this particular thing instead of like as a blanket rule. So I love that you brought that up.
Yeah, it's something I've been thinking about very recently actually, so that was why it came to mind.
Becky, have you got any final questions for Dom?
No questions, but just so inspirational, Dom. Thanks for sharing with your wisdom. And yeah, I think it's a beautiful conversation around creativity as well, isn't it? Around our business and that fine line again. You're a naturally creative, soulful person, and yet you're a business owner. There's the CEO element. And I think a lot of people resonate with that. So thank you for sharing and being so open.
Thank you for having me, ladies. It's been a pleasure.
Really, really appreciate it. And Dom is part of our community, everybody. So if you are like, hey, look, do you know what? I need to find a community where I can start to, meet people that have taken the leap, that have been on this journey, come and check out the pod. It will be linked in the show notes below. But yeah, we'd love to have you, dear listener, as part of our community too, if this feels like the right vibe for you. But thank you so much, Dom, for joining us today. And we'll drop all your links as well in the show notes, but it's DMars Designs. Is that correct?
.com, yes.
.com. And also on Instagram, you are DMars Designs.
That's Designs.
Excellent. So yeah, people can come and search you out there. But yeah, we'll be back next time on the Doing Business Differently podcast.
If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you hit that subscribe button wherever you're listening. And if you're listening to this over on our Substack, we'd love for you to join the conversation and let us know your thoughts too. Likewise, if you actively want to explore what doing business differently looks like for you, then do be sure to check out the pod, which is our private community where we share a bunch of resources every month for you to play with as you define your way of doing things. Inside the pod, there's also a ton of live sessions held every month too. To check it out, just head to the show notes below where everything is linked for you to explore further.
Thanks so much for listening. Speak soon.
Lots of love.